What if everything you have been assuming about their cold silence is completely wrong? You look at the distance, the unanswered messages, and the sudden emotional walls, concluding they simply do not care anymore. It feels like obvious proof that they have moved on without a second thought. But with an avoidant, what appears to be heartless detachment is often something entirely different beneath the surface. What looks like total indifference is frequently severe emotional paralysis. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, love does not automatically feel comforting or safe. It feels overwhelming, unpredictable, and deeply threatening to their survival. The closer you get, the more exposed and defenseless they feel inside. Instead of leaning into genuine affection, their automatic instinct is to run away and disconnect. They build massive walls not because their feelings are weak, but because those emotions have become far too powerful to regulate. Real love strips away the psychological armor they have relied on for decades. That raw vulnerability terrifies someone whose survival has always depended on staying emotionally guarded. Think about a person who spent their entire life believing that emotional closeness always ends in disappointment. Maybe they grew up learning that trusting others only brings rejection, criticism, or abandonment. Over time, those painful experiences rewired their nervous system until intimacy itself triggered alarm bells. Instead of experiencing your affection as peace, their subconscious interprets it as dangerous pressure. When you show up with patience and authentic love, their body reacts like danger is approaching. Their defenses activate long before their conscious mind can even think logically. This internal freezing is what emotional paralysis actually looks like in practice. It is not an absence of affection, but the result of never learning how to carry deep feelings safely. The stronger their attachment to you grows, the fiercer their instinct becomes to protect themselves from potential heartbreak. That is precisely why their behavior flips so suddenly and leaves you utterly confused. Conversations lose their warmth overnight, eye contact becomes distant, and text replies take days without any real explanation. They start begging for space at the exact moment the connection should be deepening. From where you sit, it feels like they have completely checked out on you, but internally, a massive battle is raging. Their mind is racing, while their genuine feelings collide with years of self-protection habits. Imagine a person who is trained for combat suddenly finding themselves in a completely peaceful sanctuary. Instead of relaxing, they become intensely suspicious and start scanning the room for hidden threats. The healthier and safer your relationship becomes, the harder it is for them to trust it. Deep inside, they hold a core belief that happiness never lasts for long. They assume that if they surrender to this love and inevitably lose it, the pain will break them. So they pull away before their heart becomes fully invested. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the avoidant mindset. Their emotional distance is mistaken for empty coldness when it is actually proof of intense internal chaos. They pull back because they feel far more than they know how to handle. Their hyperactive nervous system mistakes deep love for a life-threatening risk, making emotional shutdown a survival mechanism rather than a cruel choice. While a securely attached person naturally expresses affection through closeness and open communication, an avoidant simply freezes. Their silence is a desperate attempt to dial down the emotional volume before they lose control completely. It is certainly not a healthy way to treat a partner, but it shows how unresolved childhood wounds can completely hijack someone's adult behavior. Remaining present feels unbearable because true vulnerability activates ancient fears of being destroyed, making retreat feel like the only way to regain control. If you have been on the receiving end of this pattern, feeling rejected and hurt is completely natural. You end up questioning your own worth, wondering what you did wrong to push them away. But before you internalize their withdrawal, realize that the real battle is not between you and them. It is happening entirely inside their own mind. They are fighting against the very closeness they desperately want to experience. Love is present, but terror keeps blocking its expression. Pay close attention and you will see they get most uncomfortable right when intimacy hits its peak. They hesitate before answering personal questions and grow quiet after deeply meaningful moments. They seem crushed by simple conversations requiring emotional honesty. These reactions do not prove they lack feelings. They reveal that their internal system has been completely overloaded by emotions they never learned to navigate safely. Countless relationships collapse during this critical phase because the stone walls seem impossible to break through. The silence feels loud, the distance feels permanent, and everything looks like a final goodbye. Yet beneath that frozen surface sits a complex internal world hidden from view. Fear, shame, control, uncertainty, and genuine love all battle inside them at the same time. Understanding this truth does not mean accepting neglect or ignoring your own basic needs. It simply allows you to see the difference between someone rejecting your worth and someone protecting themselves from emotions they cannot process. When you stop chasing every withdrawal, the entire pattern becomes crystal clear. Stay with me, because what I am about to reveal next changes everything about how you view their distance. Sometimes the coldest behavior on the outside is actually the strongest proof that someone is drowning in feelings they cannot express. The person who acts the most detached is often carrying the heaviest fear of caring too deeply. What looks like an empty heart is actually emotional overflow. Paralysis is not the opposite of love. It is what happens when love collides with deep-seated fear. Never mistake absolute stillness for a lack of emotion, because quiet surfaces often hide incredible depth. Another hidden pattern people miss is that when an avoidant creates space, they are usually not trying to cut you out of their life. They are trying to protect themselves from the painful abandonment they believe is inevitable. They expect every relationship to end in ruin long before any real problems arise. So they create distance first, believing it will hurt less if they stay in control of the inevitable split. This self-sabotaging behavior started long before you ever met them. Most avoidants grew up in environments where emotional safety was unpredictable or non-existent. Instead of learning that love is stable, they learned that every close bond eventually causes pain. Because of this, developing genuine feelings for you brings intense anxiety alongside excitement. Their mind immediately starts preparing for a painful loss that has not even happened yet. Silent questions race through their mind continuously. What if this person changes their mind? What if they realize I am not enough and leave me stranded? A securely attached person would voice those anxieties and seek comfort. But an avoidant cannot risk that exposure. Instead, they rely on distance as their ultimate shield. They become overly critical, emotionally cold, or vanish for days at a time. These destructive actions are rarely about wanting you gone. They are desperate attempts to brace for impact against a heartbreak they view as guaranteed. The tragic irony is that many avoidants secretly hope their withdrawal will produce the exact opposite result. Without realizing it, they pull away while desperately praying you will remain patient and keep choosing them anyway. Their distance becomes an unconscious test of your emotional stamina. If they act cold, will you still care? If they become difficult, will you stick around? These are not calculated games, but survival instincts forged through years of emotional instability. Unfortunately, this testing strategy almost always backfires by exhausting the partner until they walk away. When you finally leave, the avoidant takes it as absolute proof that their cynical worldview was right all along. They tell themselves that nobody ever stays, completely blind to how their own defense mechanisms forced the breakup. It becomes another tragic chapter, reinforcing the very fear they started with. If you have ever walked away wondering if you mattered at all, remember this vital truth: people do not build massive fortresses around things that mean nothing to them. Avoidants build the highest walls against the people who reach them the deepest. When you manage to break through defenses they spent a lifetime building, their internal alarm system fires with maximum force. What feels like cold rejection is actually terror reacting to genuine intimacy. However, understanding their trauma should never mean sacrificing your own dignity. Their complex history explains their distance, but it never excuses emotional neglect or toxic boundaries. Your job is not to fix their past or rescue them from themselves. Your duty is to stay grounded in your own reality. You can hold deep compassion for their pain without destroying your self-respect in the process. Sometimes the healthiest choice is realizing that someone else's emotional fear is not your burden to carry. At its core, this endless cycle is driven by one toxic belief: that love must survive extreme pressure before it can ever be trusted. They pull away hoping you will chase, and create distance hoping you will bridge it. Yet most people never realize they are being tested until the bond is already broken. If you are caught in this storm, remind yourself that their sudden absence is not a measure of your worth. Their reactions simply show how fear has distorted their view of love. They treat intimacy like a battlefield where they must constantly defend against loss, rather than a safe haven. The real question is not whether you can keep proving your loyalty forever. The real question is whether they will ever feel safe enough to put down their weapons and accept love without waiting for the drop. Another mind-blowing reality is what happens while you sit there wondering why they went completely silent. They are often paying far more attention to you than you could ever imagine. Avoidants rarely disconnect as fully as their cold exterior suggests. They detach from outward expression, not internal interest. They stop texting, stop explaining, and hide their feelings, but internally their focus on you skyrockets. This creates a painful contrast. You experience total abandonment while they experience constant mental obsession over you. Rather than forgetting you, they replay past conversations, analyze every detail, and revisit shared moments on loop. They notice tiny nuances most people miss because watching from afar feels safe, while speaking openly feels terrifying. Watching requires zero vulnerability, whereas reaching out opens them up to rejection. Their mind stays hyperactive, examining your words and actions, hoping that analyzing you will give them back the control they feel losing. Observation becomes their substitute for real emotional connection. Instead of sharing what is on their heart, they study your behavior like a textbook. They convince themselves that if they can predict your next move, they will avoid being blindsided by emotional pain. This is not about building a case against you. It is about creating a false sense of safety and a connection that frightens them. The deeper their feelings grow, the more intense this watching pattern becomes. They remember offhand comments you forgot making, notice subtle shifts in your tone, and track your online activity closely. They do this because their anxious mind is searching for certainty in a dynamic that feels unpredictable. The more vulnerable they feel around you, the deeper they retreat into silent observation instead of direct interaction. But eventually, watching from the sidelines stops providing relief. They realize that no amount of silent tracking can stop them from deeply missing someone who touched their soul. Their outer appearance remains calm and unbothered, but inside a storm rages. They open old text threads without typing, hesitate over the send button, and check for your presence while forcing themselves not to make contact. Their silence is loud with mental turmoil because two massive forces are fighting inside them. One part craves your warmth, while the other fears the cost of getting close again. If they continue tracking your life long after walking away, it means the connection never actually died. They are trying to balance a deep longing for you with a lifelong habit of self-preservation, choosing to love you from a safe distance rather than risking total exposure. They do not watch to manipulate you. They watch because they care deeply, and those intense feelings terrify them. Unfortunately, you cannot cure that fear for them, no matter how much love you offer. What you can do right now is stop treating their quiet distance as proof that you were not enough. Their inability to communicate openly is a reflection of their limitations, not your failure. Do not shrink yourself or walk on eggshells just to keep an avoidant comfortable. Your presence alone was powerful enough to shake defenses they spent years constructing. If someone feels forced to quietly watch you because of the emotions you unlocked inside them, that speaks volumes about your impact. Their distance does not mean you are forgettable. It means your presence interrupted their survival habits, leaving them unsure of how to proceed. Another deeply confusing behavior is how avoidants reflect your emotions back to you instead of initiating their own. You might leave conversations feeling like you did all the heavy lifting while they merely echoed your statements to keep things going. That dynamic is very real. Avoidants rarely take the first emotional plunge. Instead, they mirror whatever emotional energy you bring to the table first. This is not a malicious game designed to trick you. It is an unconscious shield against potential rejection. Deep down, they carry immense feeling, but they are terrified of exposing it first. Because total safety feels impossible, they hesitate to show their cards. They observe, calculate, and cautiously respond only after you have paved the way. This creates a strange emotional echo chamber. You say you miss them, and only then do they admit they were thinking about you. You express affection first, and they slowly reflect a portion of it back. What is consistently missing is spontaneous emotional effort on their end. Taking the lead requires surrendering control, and control is the armor that keeps their anxiety manageable. Consequently, you are left feeling like the sole engine driving the entire relationship forward. They offer just enough affection to keep hope alive, but never enough to make you feel truly secure. When you step closer, they take a cautious step with you. When you step back, they retreat entirely into the shadows. It feels like a push-pull game, but for them, it is simply the only relational blueprint their nervous system understands. They rely heavily on emotionally secure partners to navigate the emotional landscape for them. It feels safer to follow your lead because leading means exposing raw feelings they do not trust themselves to handle. Interestingly, this mirroring behavior actually proves that a real bond exists. Avoidants do not mirror just anyone. They only reflect people who impact them deeply. In many ways, they are borrowing the warmth, vulnerability, and openness they admire in you but lack within themselves. Through imitation, they try to participate in intimacy without taking the full risk of authentic vulnerability. The tragedy is that this pattern leaves both of you starving. They continue believing closeness can exist without risk, while you mistake simple reflection for genuine availability. The connection survives on faint echoes rather than mutual investment, which eventually drains your spirit dry. Ask yourself today whether they are actively building a bridge with you or just walking across the one you built alone. Recognizing this distinction changes your entire perspective. You stop mistaking passive reflection for active commitment and start seeing reality clearly. This does not mean avoidants cannot love deeply, because many do. Their silence stems from fear, not an absence of heart. However, a love that never takes initiative places an unfair burden on the person doing all the reaching. Healthy partnerships require two people stepping into the light together. When an avoidant decides to heal, they learn to initiate affection, speak honestly, and sit with the discomfort of vulnerability. Often that growth only begins when you stop carrying the weight of the entire relationship yourself. When you step back from leading every moment, you create space to see who they truly are without your guidance. At that point, the truth reveals itself. Some people step up into emotional maturity, while others retreat behind their walls. Another subtle clue that deep feelings are forming is when an avoidant's strict routines begin to break down. People often miss this because they are looking for grand romantic speeches or dramatic changes. But the truest indicator that their defenses are failing is when their predictable life starts fracturing. Avoidants rely on rigid routines to keep overwhelming feelings at bay. Consistency gives them a sense of safety and control.